Welcome back to It's Fire for Me. I'm Jesse, and this is my wife Kim, and we're here for another Frugal Friday. Kim, what chapter are we on this week?
We are on chapter 10 of The Art of Frugal Hedonism, which is one of my favorite books, by Annie Razor Rowland with Adam Grubb. And chapter 10 is to romanticize other eras. No matter how confidently you stride through the world, leaving a mangled trail of snubbed advertising in your wake, a bit will still get stuck to your socks here and there. Escaping seduction by advertising's lifestyle romanticizing is ultimately impossible to do using strength of will alone. And you certainly wouldn't want to do it by rejecting romance. Most ads carry a subliminal message that we all have the power of self-creation, and that what they are selling can help us with that. This can only be countered by replacing their suggested romantic vision of ourselves with other romantic visions. You might even like to call it self-administered advertising. Where can we find these other visions? Looking to the world around you for people that you find inspiring in terms of strength, contentment, and panache is a great start. But why not really cast your net wide? Look at history, look at fiction, look at other animals if that's what gets you romanticizing how jaunty-free and drinking only ice melt water to quench your thirst you'd secretly like to be. While both your authors can lay claim to some impressive childhood nerd credentials, it is Annie who was and still is a certifiable library nerd. So we'll let her rhapsodize on the mental molding power of the novel a while. I remember first reading about Ernest Shackleton's Antarctic journey as a young teenager. I was fascinated and intoxicated by how the exploration team compensated for their meager rations and harsh traveling conditions by becoming more spirited and inventive. Then I came across Tracks, Robin Davidson's account of her solo journey by camel across the arid interior of Australia in the 1970s. Then Robinson Crusoe, which could kindle a desire to craft a bowl out of a coconut in even the most Gucci-clad bosom. At the same time, I was lapping up whodunits featuring a canny medieval peasant lass as sleuth and working my way through John Steinbeck's Dust Bowl era classics. I recently reread Roald Dahl's Matilda. Matilda is a genius child born into a cruel, rich, idiotic family who don't appreciate her talents. Miss Honey, Matilda's kindly schoolteacher, does, however, and in one scene, Matilda visits Miss Honey's home. In the kitchen, there are no taps over the sink, and a shelf and a single cupboard are the only furniture. On the shelf is a Primus stove and a saucepan. Miss Honey sends Matilda to the well for water, then asks, "I don't suppose you've ever done that before." "Never," Matilda said. "It's fun. How do you get enough water for your bath?" "I don't take a bath," Miss Honey said. "I wash standing up. I get a bucket full of water and I heat it on this little stove and I strip and wash myself all over." "Do you honestly do that?" Matilda asked. "Of course I do," Miss Honey said. "Every poor person in England used to wash that way until not so very long ago. And they didn't have a Primus. They had to heat the water over the fire in the hearth." "Are you poor, Miss Honey?" "Yes," Miss Honey said, "very. It's a good little stove, isn't it?" The Primus was roaring away with a powerful blue flame, and already the water in the saucepan was beginning to bubble. Miss Honey got a teapot from the cupboard and put some tea leaves into it. She also found half a small loaf of brown bread. She cut 2 thin slices. Although this scene exists to describe the poverty of Miss Honey, it kindled in me a perverse envy for the intense simplicity of her domestic life. I've had periods in my life where I've had to heat water to bathe. I haven't forgotten that there are some days where you pine for the convenience of a hot shower, but overall, the pared-back quality of those times is associated with happiness for me. And the way that simple things swell in value when there is less is inherent in this passage. The wonder at the Primus efficiency, the savoring of the bread and tea. We can project what will happen because of their preciousness. My love affair with literary portrayals of spirit and sass in a context of material scarcity has never abated. It is not the scarcity itself that matters, but rather the message that spunkiness, good friendships, and an amazing life are not dependent on buying stuff. All this romanticizing, advertising to myself of these possibilities has certainly been partially responsible for some of my life direction since. Specifically long-distance hiking, hitchhiking, and other traveling with very minimal funds and gear. More generally, a pleasure in thrift and resourcefulness, and an ongoing preference for experiences over possessions, and freedom over status. Many of us tell admiring, nostalgia-drenched tales about the resourcefulness and spirit of our grandparents in the face of harder times. We marvel at how wartime rationing improved people's health and forged strong communities as neighbors came to rely more on each other than on purchasing power for both necessities and recreation. We speak with a twinkle of envy about the simplicity of life in the olden days, or the unencumbered freedom of cattle drovers and swagmen. We digest the stories of long sea voyages to strange shores, or of forging a life in a new land, and we quietly ache to put our own tenacity to the test in such a way, if only a little. Partly these undercurrents of emotion come from a basic human appreciation for strength. Partly they speak of a yen to feel that we are living real lives challenged to capacity. Perhaps even that part of us which has noticed how food is tastier, rest is sweeter, and love is more vivid when we aren't so swaddled in cotton wool, craves a little more deprivation for the sake of these stronger joys that come with it. Our ideas about what constitutes value and success shift almost eagerly in response to stories of such lives. It is then up to each of us how much we heed these ideas instead of those brought on by the plump polish of advertising culture, and also how much we feed ourselves more such stories. Check out the list of potentially frugally romantic fodder in our further resources section.
All right. So, as you started reading this, I wasn't really sure where they were going to go with this on the form of frugality, but often in the financial independence world, I think it's referenced how there's a certain level of comfortableness and people refer to it as happiness money can bring you before it kind of drifts off and it's not actually producing any more enjoyment from it. And I think that's kind of what they were talking about here, how this lady could find enjoyment in her little stove and the efficiencies of it and stuff like that, where the wealthy people maybe were feeling less enjoyment in their life and stuff like that. So I think that might be kind of where they're going. Am I correct in thinking that, or am I missing the point in this one?
I think that's one component of it for sure. I think when you read the title, you start thinking, okay, am I supposed to think about what life would be like back in, the 1600s or the 1500s, or a time when you had to work a little harder or try a little more. And being a woman in those times actually would really suck. So I'm glad we don't live in those times. But I think you can kind of see maybe a modern day version of this when you watch like post-apocalyptic television shows. For whatever reason, this always reminds me of the show The Walking Dead, and how, there's a group that gets together and they are, most people have probably seen The Walking Dead, but they are traveling, trying to find other groups, trying to find some sort of cure to this zombie apocalypse that swept across the world. And they occasionally will stumble upon something that you can see that they find truly magical. So they're dirty, they're gritty, they're in really gross clothes, and they come across somebody who has hot water, and they all get to take hot showers. And those hot showers feel amazing because they haven't had those hot showers. Other things like, if they find canned peaches or their favorite Twinkie or something along those lines, where baseline they don't have that, and then they get to bring it in. So I think that's kind of like this combination of hard work and appreciating novelty and appreciating the work that sometimes it takes to get that novelty that a lot of us really take for granted. I think in your illustration, when you were talking about Miss Honey with that little stove and how she was really like marveling and not finding that little stove to be really novel, I feel like that would be if instead of me hating loading and unloading the dishwasher and loading and unloading the dishwasher and loading and unloading the dishwasher, it would be taking a moment to think, I have a dishwasher. Like, how cool is it that I have a dishwasher? I can put dirty dishes into a thing. I can push a button and that thing washes my dishes. And that is a really novel and impressive little machine, little appliance. And so
All right,
think,
so the next week you're not allowed to use the dishwasher so that you more appreciate it.
well, that could be one option, but I think that's not what I'm going to do. But I am, instead of just loathing the load-unload cycle that seems to constantly happen, could be recognizing with intentionality that a lot of the things that we take for granted are really, really amazing.
Yeah, good points. All right, you can keep using the dishwasher.
Wonderful.
And so the other thought I had while you were reading was how often we'll take and we'll get raises and increases in different ways, and we'll just adapt them into our lives. And then it's really hard to go back and look at how we even made it on less money. And obviously it's possible. People are making it on very little money. But when you try to figure that out and try to figure out, well, it doesn't mathematically make sense in my head on how we could live on less money, so it must not be possible. But we did it when we were young and not making a whole lot. So I think that's something too that kind of popped into my head of trying to not just spend that increase and not just take that and absorb it and not get the enjoyment out of that increase, and yet still be able to remember back on what it was you enjoyed in life when you didn't have that.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Great. So what did you get out of this chapter? Put those in the comments down below. Let us know if there's stuff that we missed out of this one. And as I was trying to wrap my head around it, as Kim read it for us. And hit that thumbs up button if you enjoyed this. And we're going to see you in the next Frugal Friday.
Have a good week.
Bye.